وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد. خل المقادير تمضي لا تغالبها، فإن من غالب الأقدار مغلوب. إن القضاء لسيف لا يقاومه شيء من الخلق إلا وهو محبوب. وامشي رويدا مع الأقدار في مهل، فإن من يكره الأقدار متعوب. سلم وفوض لحكم الله محتسبا، فإنما الأمر مقضي ومكتوب. والله يقضي بما شاء وكيف يشاء.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah, we will continue our lesson in the book Kitab Sullam Munawraq, written by Imam al-Akhdari in the field of Mantiq. And in our last lesson, we are speaking about the chapter of Qiyas, or in English we call it Syllogism. And in the last lesson, we mentioned about so many of the conditions of having a valid argument or a sound argument. So when we mentioned that arguments in logic, they are made up of premises, and this in Arabic we call it the muqaddimah. So we have the first premise, and we have the second premise, and so on and so forth. So premises can be a lot, and it doesn't mean that it is only two premises. But usually we just give any examples due to the simplicity for us to understand this topic. But premises basically can be a lot, and then you have the conclusion. You have the conclusion. So what we'll do right now, we will read again what is mentioned by the author. So basically this is where we started babun fil qiyas. The author began by speaking about the definition of qiyas, that it is an argument that you have the premises and then you deduce the conclusion from those premises. And then he mentioned summa al-qiyasu indahum qismani faminhum ma yud'a bil-iqtirani. Then he mentioned there are two types of syllogism. Number one is called al-iqtirani, and number two is al-istisna'i. And then he goes on to speak about Qiyas al-Iqtirani. This is basically where we are, where he mentioned وَهُوَ الَّذِي دَلَّ عَلَى النَّتِيجَةِ بِقُوَّةٍ وَاخْتَصَّ بِالْحَمْلِيَّةِ. So he mentioned that the first type of Qiyas, the Qiyas Iqtirani, it is a type of syllogism that you are able to deduce the natija, yani the conclusion, from the arrangement of the premises. From the arrangement of the premises. So it is something that is profound, that due to the arrangement of those premises, you can deduce the natija, yani the conclusion. And then he mentioned that this is specifically on proposition. So the conclusions must be in a form of a proposition, and not be in a form of a question, in the form of a question, or in the form of an exception, and so on and so forth. So it must be a proper proposition with a subject with a predicate, proposition that you can say whether it is a true statement or false statement. So then only we can speak about qiyas iqtirani. So the arrangement of those propositions must be in a way that we are able to deduce the conclusion. So last week I gave examples of arguments that you cannot deduce the conclusion because it is not related. It is not related. And if, for example, we say that human beings can think horses any make any their sound. So there is no connection any between human beings and horses any in these two any propositions. So one is speaking about human beings, the other one is speaking about horses. So there must be a connection in order for us any to deduce the conclusion. So this is basically any what he mentioned. For in turid tarkibahu, yet if you want to arrange the premises, farakkiba muqaddimatihi ala ma wajaba, then you have any to follow the arrangement of those premises to such an extent that the meanings any of those propositions any are true, and that they are related any to one another, so that you can deduce the conclusion. Then he mentioned warattibil muqaddimati wanzura sahihaha min fasidin mukhtabira. So after you have arranged any those premises, then you look at those premises and whether it is something that is true or false. So if it is something and that is false, then the conclusion or the natija will also be false. So we have to ascertain that the premises must be true in order for us to say that this is a sound argument, that the conclusion of this argument and the result of this argument is also true. So this is what we covered. I'm just doing some revision. Then he mentioned warattibil muqaddimati wanzura sahihaha min fasidin mukhtabira. This is the same as the other one. Fa inna lazimal muqaddimati bihasabil muqaddimati ati wa ma min al muqaddimati surra fayajibu indirajuha fil kubra. So our lesson will begin from number 77. Before that he mentioned fa inna lazimal muqaddimati bihasabil muqaddimati ati. So the truth of a premise it depends on the truth of the other premises. And if all the premises are true sentences, are true propositions, then only you can get benefit from that argument. But if any one of those premises is not true, then you will not get a true natija. So let us go back to our examples. This is some many of the examples. And earlier we mentioned that there must be related. It must be related. The premises they must be arranged in a way they are related. So for example, if a person say kullu insan himar, all humans are donkey. All humans are donkey. This is false statement. Wa kullu himar sahal, and all donkeys make this sound sound of horses, which is also not true. Then when comes to the deduction, kullu insan sahal, you will also get a false natija, conclusion. So this is an example where when you have false propositions and false premises, it will entail a false conclusion. So this is where the author is saying that you must make sure that all these premises must be true in order for you to deduce the proper natija. The next example, and now we look at this example. So we are going to speak about this part, where he mentioned wama minal muqaddimati surra fayajibu indirajuha fil kubra. So this is a new terminology that we are going to learn. We have muqaddima surra. It is called the small premise or the minor premise, and then you have the major premise, minor premise, and then you have the major premise. So what does it mean by minor premise and major premise? So this is an example that I will just run through. So let us look at this form of qiyas or this syllogism, this argument. So now you have this first premise, and as what we mentioned, we have the muqaddimatul ula, the first muqaddimah, the first premise. This one is the second premise. Tamam. So you have the second premise, and then here you have the and then you will have the natija. Later on we will deduce the natija from here. Okay, so let us just focus on this example. So I will just translate this. The first premise says kullu insan hayawan. So based on our lessons in mantiq, when we say kullu, this is universal. This is this if you see any kullu, yani it is what you call it, it is mujib, yani it is a positive any proposition, positive any sentence, and it is a universal one. It is not any a particular one. So you have a universal positive proposition. So it says kullu insan hayawan, meaning all any humans, all humans are beings, yani living beings. So this is any a true statement. All humans any are beings. So in order for us any to ascertain whether it is true statements, of course any we have to speak any about the evidences. So are all any humans any beings? Any yes, any all humans any are beings. Any this is easy. There is no need any for us any to bring about any complex any evidences any pertaining any to this. And then any we have the second muqaddimah. The second any muqaddimah. So let us any pay attention yani to this part first, hayawan. So this is the predicate of the first muqaddimah. This is the predicate of the first muqaddimah. This is the predicate any of the first muqaddimah, and it is a subject of the second muqaddimah. This is subject any of the second any muqaddimah. And then any we have any this insan. This is any the subject of the first any muqaddimah. And then we have any jism. Jism any is the predicate of the second muqaddimah. So now any we have kullu insan hayawan. All humans any are beings. And then wa kullu hayawan jismun. It means all beings are bodies. All beings any are bodies. Okay, now we are going any to deduce the natija. What is any the conclusion? So kullu insan hayawan. All humans any are beings. Wa kullu hayawan jism. All beings are bodies. So the natija yani is kullu insan jism. Kullu insan jism. Yani all humans are bodies. All humans any are bodies. So in Arabic any we will say kullu insan jism. Kullu insan jismun. Kullu insan jismun. All humans any are bodies. So now when we look any at again, this is initially yellow in color. So I will just put yellow, and then jism any is the green one. Okay, this is the thing any that we have to understand. If you have the subject any of the natija, the subject any of the natija is called the small muqaddimah. The subject any of the natija. What is any the subject any of the natija? Insan, correct or not? This is any the subject any of the subject of the conclusion. So where is the proposition anywhere you have the subject any of the conclusion? So you have it at the first proposition or the first any premise. So this premise any is called muqaddimatu surah, the small any muqaddimah. It is called any muqaddimah asura. Why is called any the muqaddimah surah? Because the subject of the natija is the subject of the muqaddimah. So in order for us to ascertain where is the small muqaddimah, it goes back to what is the subject of the natija. So now we have the subject of the natija, and the subject is present in the first premise. So we call the first premise muqaddimatus surah. And then we have muqaddimatul kubra, the large muqaddimah, the large premise. The large premise is when the predicate of the natija falls under it. So it is the second proposition. The second proposition. So second proposition is considered to be the large muqaddimah. And then we have this word hayawan repeating in both of these premises. Kullu insan hayawan wa kullu hayawan jism. We call it the haddul awsat. In mantiq we call it the intermediary. The intermediary. So this is the thing that is binding the two propositions. So we call it haddul awsat. So kullu insan hayawan wa kullu hayawan jismun. So you do not find the haddul awsat in the muqaddimah. So what you find is, this is from the muqaddimah surah, this is from the muqaddimah kubra. So muqaddimah surah is where the subject is in the natija. Muqaddimah kubra is when the predicate is in the natija. So these are some of the terms that our scholars in mantiq they use when they analyze arguments. When they analyze arguments, because before this we are going into the types of arguments. So these are some of the terminology. So we have muqaddimatul surah, we have muqaddimatul kubra, and we have al haddul awsat. So we have the minor muqaddimah, the major muqaddimah, and then we have the middle. The middle is the thing that is binding what you call it in between the two propositions. So this is basically what the author will mention here. So now when we go back into Sullam, the author mentioned wama minal muqaddimati surah. So now this is the term just now I was explaining. Muqaddimat asura is when the subject of the natija is present in it. So in that case earlier it is the first premise. Fayajibu indirajuha fil kubra. So there must be indiraj. Indiraj meaning it must be attached to the kubra. There must be a relationship. What is the relationship? So this is the example. So now when we analyze this argument, how is the first premise and the second premise related? The answer will be the word hayawan. Because when we say kullu insan hayawan, all humans are beings, and then the second premise say all beings. Now we repeat the predicate. So now when we are binding the second premise with the first premise. So this is the meaning of indiraj. Indiraj, and in Arabic we call it indiraj. There is a connection, and that connection is through haddul awsat. It is the thing that binds the two proposition, the two proposition together. So as what I mentioned earlier, there must be this binding factor. Otherwise we cannot deduce the natija. We cannot deduce the conclusion. So premises must be related to one another. This is where the author mentioned yajibu indirajua. So there must be able to do indiraj. So there must be a relation between the first premise and the second premise. So there must be the haddul awsat in place in order for us to ascertain the natija later on. So he mentioned wama minal muqaddimati surah fayajibu indirajuha fil kubra. So al kubra is where the predicate of the natija is. Wadhatu haddin asgharin surahuma wadhatu haddin akbarin kubrahuma. So this is what we mentioned. What you call it when comes to the subject of the natija, this is from the muqaddimah surah, and when comes to the predicate of the natija comes from muqaddimah al kubra. And then he mentioned wa asrarun fadaka dhundiraji wa wasatun yulra ladal intaji. And then he mentioned what is needed is the surah. As for the wusta, the wasat, yani the middle one. The middle one is the binding one. This is not mentioned in the conclusion. So what is mentioned in the conclusion is surah. This is haddul surah or haddul asrar. This is haddul akbar. This is haddul awsat. And these so many other terminologies. Haddul asrar, haddul akbar, haddul awsat. So haddul awsat is the one that is binding. But what is mentioned in the natija yani is haddul asra and haddul akbar. So this is called muqaddima asura. This is called muqaddimatul kubra. It is called any muqaddima surah yani because what you call it, the subject any of the natija is there, and this is called muqaddimatul kubra because the predicate any of the natija is there. But as far as the haddul awsat yani is concerned, this is where the author yani mentioned yulra, yani it is not mentioned in the natija. You don't see any hayawan any in the natija. Ladal intaji, yani when you deduce the conclusion. So this is any what any the author yani mentioned. So I hope any this simple any illustration make it easy any for us to understand any this what any the author any speaking any about. This is just any simple examples any. There are many other examples any that we can use. But any we stick any to one so that any it becomes easy for us any to focus and to understand the connection any between the subjects and the predicates any of all these premises, and how any we deduce any the natija, and how any we determine what is a minor premise, what is a major premise, and what is any the binding factor any between the two yani premises. So these are so many of the terms any the author any mentioned. Inshallah ta'ala, next week any we will go into the types of syllogism in greater any detail. But before any we go into that topic, any this thing any must be clear. So when we say muqaddimatul ula, we must understand what is the author is speaking about. Muqaddimatul kubra, what is it? Haddul asrar, what is it? Haddul akbar, what is it? Haddul awsat, any what is it? What is any the natija, the mawdu, the subject any of the natija, the predicate any of the natija. So all these things any are taken any into account any when we analyze arguments. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhaban nar. Sallallahu